So hey everyone, so I'm working on this GMC here, and this ready lift system, it's all right. You know, I mean, it splits the difference between the bottom and the top. Okay. Now, however, I'll tell you what I don't like, and then what I like about this lift. So what I don't like is that the screws right here. Let me see if I can get to that. There you go. So these nuts right here, these are supposed to take place of the original ones. Now these studs right here extend up about I'd say an inch out of the original nut, and when you put that spacer up underneath this coil spring here, what happens is that stud gets shorter, and they give you these 14 millimeter nuts to go in their place. However, the 14 millimeter nut, the flange nut, it doesn't really cover. I don't know if you guys can see that, but see how it's not really covering the slot where the original nut went. Now, the original ones, these are the original ones, okay? Now, as you can see, the threads are at the top here, and it's a larger diameter flange for the nut, and obviously you can't use these because now the stud is shorter and it's no longer long enough to reach up in there and grab the threads up here. So you're basically looking at, you know, half the diameter of this with the replacement hardware. That's the only thing I don't like about it. Now, you could put washers, but then if you put a washer up underneath this nut here, you don't really have much of a grab situation on that on the top frame here. See? I mean, you're just barely getting the threads with the nuts that they supply you with. And there's a spacer up underneath there. I'd say it's a good 7/8 of a spacer, and they give you this 1/4 inch to go there. And I replaced these with the nuts on the bottom. Replace those with flange nut. I'm going to replace these. The ones that come in the kit are like a soft material. It's not really a hardened material, so those will get replaced with a grade 8 flange nut. And that's about it. It's the hardware that's the issue. Now, as far as the upper control arm goes, I like it. It comes with a greasable ball joint. It has urethane bushings, okay? So basically, instead of a rubber bushing, I'm trying to get my headlamp to give you a good view here. So basically, instead of a rubber bushing keeping it in one location, and as the suspension goes up and down through its movement, you know, its travel, it actually twists the original bushing and distort it, as to where these urethane ones, it glides up and down and keeps the alignment of the bushing in the control arm. So the upper control arm, very nice. It's tubular. It's very much beefier than the original stuff. The original stuff is, you know, it's aluminum. It's made to collapse. So, and I'll show you that right over here. And that's it. I mean, it's strong, okay? I'll give it that. It is strong, but it is very light, and it has like a flimsy feel. But I know that right there, it's a strong alloy. And if I actually put this on a vise and I hit it real hard with a hammer to see if I break it, because when you feel it, it feels like it'll just snap. But it's actually pretty decent alloy there. Definitely looks way better than that. And instead of breaking like those, if you get in like an accident or something, those are actually meant to break and collapse and fold, as to where the steel one, the steel tubular setup here, I mean, that'll bend and it'll twist, but it won't break. So how do you put this lift on? Well, the way I went about it was not the directions way. I left the caliper on, I left the nut on the CV axle here. And basically what I did was I took off the ABS sensors, the wiring for the sensors, okay? Just get that loose. And I loosened the upper control arm ball joint. I just loosened it. And I loosened the bolts there. And then I loosened the nuts on the top. Now, after you get all those loose, you don't want to take the nuts off, okay? Because when you take the nuts off, you have no safety point of, you know, anything like the upper ball joint. If that decides to deattach, you know, unpress itself from there, and now you got this spring that's collapsed a little bit, slamming down the lower control arm, and if you're sitting up underneath it, that can hurt. So I just put a jack up underneath there. I jack it up on the stud right here, and you got to be careful when you jack it up on this, because it'll actually force the spindle in a way to where if you don't relieve tension on the suspension system first, it'll slam towards the back or the front. So just be wary of that. And so basically, I jack up, I get the weight off of it, you tilt this. Okay, this whole spindle assembly here. See how it's positioning that stud and nut. What happens is, if you have tension here, okay, and you take the nut off and you deattach this, it's going to slam forward or backwards on you. Okay, so just be wary of that. But when you take the pressure off of here, you can loosen the nut on the sway bar link. Okay, don't take it off, because, you know, again, the nuts on the studs here are your safeties. You just want to loosen it to where this control arm will drop. Okay, it'll allow it to drop, because remember, that sway bar is hooked to the other side. It doesn't want it to drop. So loosen this up, and when you loosen that up, take the nut off. All right. So when you loosen that, when you loosen the sway bar link here, you want to hit the top of the spindle here with a hammer, okay? Just a regular hammer, and it doesn't take much force, all right? You just got to tap on it, and it'll dislodge, and it'll get caught up on the nut. When it gets caught up on the nut, you want to jack the suspension up more, higher, okay? And you're going to take this, and you're going to move it around to where when you feel the nut come loose and you can spin it off by hand, that's what you want, okay? You want to take it off by hand, and what you want to do is, this is going to be locked up on that upper ball joint there, okay? It's going to be like this. And then what you want to do is you want to lower this down, and when you get to the end here, remember, you got tension there, so this is going to fold one way or the other. So just let it drop out of place, and what will happen is it'll fold one way, but not with a lot of force, because you're relieving it as you're allowing it to settle. You're allowing the jack to go down. So after you get that out of the way, remove the nuts on top, remove these bolts. That'll slide up to the side, out of the way. I usually put the bottom of this cartridge here, or the shock, through the tie rod and the lower control arm, and just let it sit there. And I put the spacer on, and I just let it sit there. That's 21 millimeter, and that's 21 millimeter. I'll put the impact in there with a swivel, undo it with a 21 millimeter wrench. Same on the other side. And the upper control arm is ready to pull out of the vehicle. You pull it out, you slide this one in, you put the washers on that are supplied in the kit. You can use the hardware that they give you in the kit, however, it's not really strong, so I just reuse the original hardware that came with the truck and tighten it up. Okay. Once this is tightened up, slide the coil over in place. Just put the nuts on a couple of threads so you can move the coil over. Maneuver the coil over to where you get the bolts in. The bolts will slide right in. Oh yeah, you want to put that. You want to put the plate in and then slide your bolts in. Okay. So as soon as that's in, you're basically right here. This is where I decided to start taking a video. But yeah, the Ready Lift is actually really nice. It's way better than some of those other cheap kits out there. This is by far I would say, one of the best leveling systems out there. It's definitely an upgrade. It definitely looks better. However, I would replace the nuts that come in the kit for the lower coilover with hardened ones. And what I would do is I would actually get a larger flange nut for the top, which I'm going to be doing here shortly. I just got to run to the store and get them. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty good. Now you can get away with using what they supply to you because it's not a kit that you want to put on for off-road use. This is an on-road kit, all right? These kits are on-road. You're not going to have the front wheels come off the ground on an on-road kit. So it's going to be constant pressure right here, and you don't really need the flange to be covering the surface area of this, all right? Because what will end up happening is if you don't correct that, those will rip right through, all right? It'll rip right through this. Or it'll bend the flange to the point where it just pulls through. So, so I'll have to get larger flange nuts for that. But other than that, I think it's pretty decent. You know, for an on-road vehicle, daily driver, sure, I'd do it. So let me get this back together here, and see if I can just get some action video here. And these control arms, they actually position this ball joint a little bit lower and angled away from the coilover. And that's a positive thing because on the cheaper kits, when you don't have the upper control arm, what it is that control arm, it gets at a steeper angle and it pulls in towards the frame. And what will happen is it'll catch on the coil here, okay? These aftermarket control arms are designed in a way to where if it is close, they make sure that it's in between the coils, and or that the ball joint is at such an angle that it'll actually kick out the top of the spindle to where it's away from the coil. So definitely an upper control arm is your best leveling kit situation. I would definitely recommend a Ready Lift to anyone that asks what a decent leveling kit is. So let me just get this together here. And all in all, it took about an hour, taking my time. Now, granted, I do this stuff a lot, these leveling kits, and if you don't do it a lot, I'd say it would take you 3 hours, okay? For the average Joe, just to come in here and be like, okay, I'm gonna try putting the suspension lift on, and whatever it is, will be. So 3 hours for the do-it-yourselfer, and about an hour or hour and a half if you want to take your time for a professional to do it. So that's tight. These are tight. I need to tighten the top. Well, I got to get the flange nuts first. And that's about it. I'll tighten these bolts when I get hardened flange nuts for there. So right now, I'm basically stuck going to the store, and when I come back, those nuts will be replaced. Those nuts will be replaced, and I'll tighten everything again, and I'll check the sway bar link again. You always want to double check your bolts and nuts, and then put the wheel on, and that's it. So till next time, go blow a gear in someone's ear. And you definitely want to give her some grease.